Sit down, you useless man. Your wife's about to learn what real consequences look like.
The words cracked through the courtroom before anyone could breathe. The HOA president, sharp suit, sharper smile, leaned forward as if the hearing were created for her alone. Then she lifted her hand and slapped the woman standing beside the maintenance worker, the sound echoing off the wooden benches like a small explosion. Papers scattered. The bailiff froze. Even the judge's face twitched with startled confusion, and the maintenance worker didn't move. He just inhaled once, slow, steady, the kind of breath a man takes before choosing whether to break or rise. No shaking hands, no shouted threats, no scrambling toward the chaos. He simply lifted his eyes toward the bench, toward the shock rippling across the room, as if he'd seen much worse in much darker rooms. Before I tell you how that single moment forced a woman drunk on power to sit trembling in the judge's chair minutes later, before anyone knew who the quiet man truly was, there's something you need to understand about the way justice works when arrogance starts believing it owns the law. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. Because this isn't just a story about a slap. It's about a courtroom discovering that the man it ignored was the only person in the building trained to hold everyone accountable. The maintenance worker, Elias, didn't lunge or shout or demand revenge. He didn't even raise his voice. He reached gently for his wife's arm, steadying her trembling shoulder, and whispered something only she could hear. She nodded, though tears clung to her lashes, stunned by the blow and the public humiliation wrapped inside it. People expected rage from him. Instead, they got silence that felt heavier than anger. The kind of silence a man carries after spending years examining corruption no one else dared to touch. The kind of silence that hides skill, experience, and an expertise the court didn't know it desperately needed. Leah clutched her folder of HOA notices, ridiculous citations for imaginary violations, every one of them designed to force the family from their home. She had come hoping for fairness, believing the court would see reason. But reason was not what Marlene Stokes, the HOA president, came for. She came for spectacle, for domination, for the satisfaction of watching a working-class couple bow under pressure she believed she controlled. What she didn't consider was how deeply Elias valued dignity, his wife's, his family's, and the small circle of people who mattered to him. Losing his old career to protect his sick daughter had changed him, but it hadn't erased the training that shaped him. It lived in him quietly, waiting, patient. When Leah's eyes lifted to his, she didn't see fear. She saw certainty. He helped her sit, kneeling in front of her for a moment to check if she was physically hurt. His touch was gentle, his movements measured, the way he'd once handled victims during high-pressure field investigations. To the gallery, he still looked like background noise, a maintenance man who blended into the courthouse walls. But to Leah, he was something else entirely. While the judge barked for order, his voice cracked. Sweat glistened on his forehead, the stress of the sudden outbreak shaking his usual composure. Marlene's grin widened at the judge's discomfort. She had learned over the years that he bent easily when she pushed. Elias noticed the judge's uneven breathing, a practiced glance, a habit he hadn't shaken from his former life. He straightened, still calm, still quiet. His voice dropped low near Leah's ear. "Stay seated. Don't speak until you need to." She nodded again, trusting him as she always did. Across the courtroom, Marlene paced like a queen whose crown had been briefly knocked loose. She smoothed her blazer, flicked imaginary dust from her sleeve, then turned her eyes toward the bench as if expecting an applause. When none came, she clicked her tongue dramatically. "Are we done pretending?" she announced. "Or do we need the janitor to clean up this mess before we continue?" the gallery murmured. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. Elias didn't respond. His stillness unnerved her more than any retaliation could have. Then the judge tried to stand. He took one step toward the bench, opened his mouth to regain control, and his knees buckled. His gavel hit the floor. The bailiff lunged. Leah gasped. Marlene's smirk vanished. Elias didn't hesitate. Before anyone else processed what was happening, he was already moving, guiding the judge's fall, checking his pulse, assessing his coloring. The movements were automatic, practiced, precise, nothing like the fumbling panic of an untrained bystander. The bailiff realized it instantly and stepped back, letting him take over. The courtroom went silent. And in that silence, something shifted. People who had dismissed him minutes earlier now watched with the kind of dawning confusion that happens when someone you thought you understood suddenly doesn't fit in the box you put them in. Because this maintenance worker didn't move like one. He moved like someone who had done this before. As he stabilized the judge and called for medical support, the clerk scrambled to initiate emergency protocol. When she pulled up the state roster to identify who in the building was certified for interim procedural control, her eyes widened. She looked at Elias, really looked at him, and the entire room held its breath. The clerk's voice cracked as she read the name glowing on her screen, her eyes flicking between the digital roster and the man kneeling beside the judge. He's certified, she whispered, barely loud enough for the bailiff to hear. But the bailiff heard, and so did half the gallery leaning forward in stunned silence. Elias didn't look up. He stayed focused on the judge's pulse, stabilizing the man's breathing until the EMTs rushed through the courtroom doors. Leah watched him with a trembling hand pressed to her cheek, the stinging reminder of Marlene's slap burning brighter with each second. Yet none of that humiliation was as shocking as the slow realization spreading through the room. The maintenance worker wasn't supposed to know how to do this. Not with this precision, not with this authority. The bailiff crouched beside him. "Sir, are you trained?" Elias gave a short nod. "Field investigation and medical stabilization, former." That single word landed heavier than any full explanation. It hinted at a life no one here had seen, a skill set no janitorial jacket could hide once he moved like that. When the EMTs took over, he stepped back with quiet efficiency, wiping his hands on his work pants, not out of nervousness but habit. Something drilled into him years ago. Leah touched his arm softly, searching his face as if trying to piece together the man she married with the man she just watched take command of a collapsing judge. "You okay?" he murmured. She nodded, though the uncertainty in her eyes said she was processing far more than her own pain. Behind them, Marlene Stokes paced in tight, angry circles. Her voice hissed low, sharp enough to cut. "What kind of trick is this? He's just maintenance. Someone fix the system. This is wrong." The clerk straightened. "The system pulls directly from the State Oversight Board. His credentials are real." She swallowed. "And he's the highest-ranking certified investigator currently in the building." No one said anything for several seconds. Then every head turned toward Elias. He didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't claim authority. He simply lifted his eyes toward the clerk, waiting for her next words. Under emergency courtroom protocol, when a judge collapses during a live hearing involving potential misconduct, the highest certified legal investigator present must step in to secure the chain of evidence until a substitute judge arrives. The clerk, pale and confused by the unfolding chaos, recited the policy aloud. Marlene's face drained of color. "No, absolutely not. I won't be questioned by a janitor." The bailiff's patience snapped. "Ma'am, you don't get to choose." Panic flickered behind her eyes, because for the first time she didn't control the room. Elias finally rose to his feet. His movements were slow, steady, deliberate. No dramatic flourish, no theatrics, just quiet certainty. He walked to a nearby chair, wiped a bit of dust from the armrest, and took a seat where he could see both Leah and the still chaotic bench area. Leah watched him, her heartbeat pounding in her throat, a new wave of safety replacing her earlier fear. Whatever he used to be, whoever he used to be, he wasn't done yet. The clerk approached him, carefully. "The system designated you to secure the hearing, until Judge Stanford arrives." He nodded once, accepting without ego. "Then, let's start by confirming the integrity of the record. Everything that happened from the moment the session opened needs to stay preserved." The bailiff immediately began pulling the footage, his respect shifting from routine courtesy to something much deeper. The crowd mirrored him. People who barely acknowledged Elias when he swept floors or repaired vents were now staring as if seeing a stranger. Leah's eyes softened. She had always known he carried a past he rarely unpacked. Long nights, quiet scars, and training that didn't belong in ordinary life. But seeing him step into it felt like watching a door open she didn't know existed. Then came the next required step of the protocol. To avoid contamination of testimony, the clerk announced shakily, the primary aggressor must be seated at the central witness position for the interim investigator's review. The central witness seat was the judge's chair. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Marlene shook her head violently. "No, I won't. This is humiliating." Elias didn't raise his voice. Protocol isn't optional. The bailiff gestured, firm but professional. "Ma'am." Her heels scraped against the floor as she backed away, but there was nowhere to go. Under the cameras, under the lights, under the weight of a courtroom she once ruled through arrogance, she was guided, shaking, to the judge's chair. She sat. The symbolism didn't escape anyone. Moments ago, she had been slapping Leah with confidence born from unchecked power. Now she sat trembling in the seat meant for authority, her hands gripping the armrests as if that could save her. Elias folded his hands calmly. "Let's begin with the events leading up to the assault." His voice wasn't angry. It was controlled, measured, professional. The voice of a man who once lived in rooms far more dangerous than this one. And as the courtroom settled, as every eye turned toward the unexpected investigator at the center of this spiraling hearing, Leah felt something shift in the world around her. It wasn't just justice beginning to turn. It was the slow, certain rise of the man no one thought to fear, until now. The courtroom felt different the moment Elias spoke. Not louder, not calmer, just different. Like the air itself shifted its allegiance. Marlene gripped the arms of the judge's chair, staring down at him with a mixture of disbelief and venom. But the tremor in her fingers betrayed her confidence. She wasn't used to being questioned, much less by someone she believed existed purely to sweep the hallways she strutted through. Elias held her gaze for a quiet second before turning to the bailiff. "Play the footage from the start of the hearing. I want the exact sequence." The bailiff didn't hesitate. Respect had replaced routine. As he cued the footage, the clerk hovered nearby, her nerves frayed by the chaos, but anchored by the realization that protocol was no longer merely words on a manual. Someone in the room knew how to enact it. The gallery leaned forward as the recording flickered onto the central display. There was Marlene entering with her packet of fabricated HOA violations, chin high, shoulders back. There was Leah stepping up hesitantly, clutching her folder, her voice quiet but steady. And then the moment that silenced everyone, the slap. Sharp, sudden, unprovoked. A collective murmur rippled across the benches. Elias let the sound die down before speaking again. Thank you. Pause there. Leah watched him with soft, steady eyes. She didn't understand every rule he followed, but she recognized the way he arranged chaos, like he'd been trained for it. Elias leaned slightly toward the clerk without raising his voice. Has Judge Reed shown any signs of compromised neutrality in HOA-related cases before today? The clerk stiffened. The question wasn't casual, it was surgical. I'm not sure I can. It's a procedural question, he reminded gently, not an accusation. She swallowed. There have been murmurs, but nothing formal. Murmurs, Marlene snapped. Please, I've worked with Judge Reed for years. He respects order, unlike your wife. Leah flinched at the jab, but Elias didn't react. He simply turned toward the display again, letting Marlene's arrogance settle into the record like another piece of evidence. He spoke evenly. According to the footage, you approached the petitioner with physical aggression. Can you explain what led to that? Marlene scoffed. Explain? To you? Yes. 2 letters, delivered without hostility, pinned her in place. Her eyes darted toward the gallery, expecting the crowd to support her. But whispers were already spreading. The image of her slap was hard to defend. Her long-standing reputation for bullying didn't help, and Elias's composure, steady as a stone, undercut her every attempt to regain control. She lifted her chin. The woman disrespected me and this entire community. She refuses to follow basic HOA standards. Someone had to assert discipline. Elias blinked once, slowly. Discipline is not the jurisdiction of an HOA. It is when they undermine the order I built. You built? He repeated, not mocking, simply clarifying. Marlene's jaw tensed. Do you have any idea how much work it takes to keep a neighborhood stable? People need leadership, structure, rules. Without them, everything collapses. Elias didn't need to look at Leah to feel her sadness. She had tried, for months, to explain that the HOA wasn't protecting the community. It was terrorizing it. He tilted his head slightly. Is that how you justify falsifying citations? The gallery gasped again. The clerk pressed a hand to her lips. Marlene froze. You can't prove that. His expression didn't change. We'll get to the documents shortly. Leah's breath caught. She recognized the shift in his posture, the investigative tone she hadn't heard since before their daughter's illness. The tone of a man who didn't accuse unless he already knew the truth. Elias folded his hands. Let's step back. What was your intention bringing this case to court? To correct behavior before it spreads. By slapping someone? Marlene's nostrils flared. You think you're clever, don't you? Acting like some hero because you checked the pulse and stood up. No, he said calmly. I don't think I'm a hero. I think I'm responsible. She hated that answer because it didn't give her anything to attack. He shifted attention to the bailiff. Has the medical team cleared Judge Reed for transport? Yes, they're moving him now. Good. Elias returned his gaze to the clerk. What's the ETA for the substitute judge? 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Enough time to unravel the facade Marlene had built, but not enough to finish exposing her fully. So this part mattered most. The foundation of the public reversal. He looked at Leah. Please step forward. Her breath wavered, but she obeyed. She stood at the podium, hands tight on the edges. Describe the last 6 months, Elias said gently. Only factual incidents, no speculation. Leah nodded, voice fragile but clear. She detailed the bogus violation notices, the sudden fines, the surprise inspections, the retaliatory citations after she asked for clarification. Each incident in her story landed like a stone dropped into still water, rippling through the crowd, hitting ears that had only known Marlene's version of the neighborhood. When she reached the part about their son being frightened after Marlene threatened to check the windows next, more than one person in the gallery gasped. Elias let silence settle after she finished, a silence thick with shifting perceptions. Then he turned back to Marlene. "Do you dispute any of that?" Her lips curled. "I dispute everything. These people play victim because they can't follow simple rules." "Rules you wrote," he clarified. "Someone has to." "Someone," he echoed softly. "Not you alone." Her eyes narrowed. "I'm done answering." "That's fine," he replied. "Your refusal goes into the record." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room had already shifted toward him. Respect had moved. Authority had moved. Public perception had moved. This was the first step of the strategy, public exposure. And it was working. As the substitute judge entered the doorway, Elias rose slowly, the room holding its breath. They all sensed it. The man they ignored was about to reshape everything. The substitute judge stepped fully into the room, the door closing behind her with a soft thud that carried more authority than any gavel strike. The gallery rose. Even Marlene straightened instinctively, though the judge's chair beneath her felt like a burning brand she desperately wanted to escape. Elias remained standing as the judge approached the bench, her eyes taking in the scene. The scattered papers, the shaken clerk, the bailiff hovering near the recording console, and Elias himself positioned with calm, professional posture only someone trained for crisis would hold. Judge Stanford adjusted her glasses. "I received an emergency alert from the clerk. Judge Reed is en route to the hospital?" The EMT's departure had just quieted the hallway, but the tension inside the courtroom still pulsed. The clerk nodded quickly. "Yes, Your Honor. Collapsed during a live hearing. Per emergency protocol, the highest certified investigator in the building assumed interim control." Her gaze slid toward Elias. "Your name?" "Elias Grant, ma'am." Recognition flickered across her expression. Not personal recognition, but the kind reserved for those trained in a discipline she respected. "Oversight certified?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "Military legal investigations, active certification on state file." Judge Stanford exhaled slowly. "Then you acted within protocol. Thank you for stabilizing the bench in the interim." Marlene's jaw dropped. She shot forward in the chair. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. You don't understand. He's a maintenance worker, a janitor. He shouldn't be questioning anyone." The judge didn't even look at her. "Ma'am, return to your position. That chair is a recording requirement under emergency code." The collapse of authority was written plainly across Marlene's face. She sank back down, her fingers gripping the armrests so tightly her knuckles blanched. She wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by someone she expected to control. Judge Stanford turned to the clerk. "Brief me." The clerk began explaining the chain of events, the hearing opening, the escalating tension, the assault, the judge's collapse, and protocol being enacted. When she reached the slap, Judge Stanford's expression hardened. "You struck the petitioner?" she asked sharply. Marlene lifted her chin. "I corrected her behavior." That sentence alone shifted the room. Judge Stanford's voice became steel. "Correction does not include physical violence. Not in this courthouse. Not anywhere." Elias didn't speak, but the judge's response strengthened his position. He stepped slightly to the side, letting the judge assume full control while maintaining presence as the investigator whose preliminary work was now part of the record. Judge Stanford glanced toward the display. "Play the sequence." The footage restarted, showing Leah, timid but determined, standing at the podium. It showed Marlene's abrupt advance. It showed the slap. The sound reverberated across the courtroom a second time. not as shock, but as evidence. When the footage paused, the judge faced Marlene. "Your actions are legally indefensible." Marlene pointed at Elias. "He provoked this. He and his wife—" "Enough," the judge snapped. "This is not your courtroom." The words hit harder than the slap ever had. Leah inhaled shakily. Elias felt her eyes on him, soft, reassured, and grateful not just for his presence but for his restraint. He didn't need to correct Marlene. The judge was doing it for him. Judge Stanford turned her attention back to Elias. "You conducted the interim inquiry. Summarize your findings." He nodded once. Stepping closer, he kept his voice low but clear. "The footage disproves the respondent's claim of provocation. The petitioner was compliant and non-confrontational. The respondent approached without judicial instruction, made contact unprovoked, and escalated the environment toward instability. Additionally, petitioner testimony suggests a 6-month pattern of targeted harassment related to HOA enforcement irregularities." Whispers spread through the gallery like wind through dry leaves. Judge Stanford tapped the arm of the bench. "Irregularities meaning fraud?" "Potentially," Elias answered. "Citations beyond normal scope. Evidence appears manipulated. I'd recommend a deeper review." Marlene's voice cracked. "This is insane. He's twisting everything." Judge Stanford didn't blink. "Actually, he's following procedure." The tension in the room pulled tight. Elias could feel the undercurrent shift again, respect solidifying around him like stone. Even the bailiff, arms folded now, seemed to stand closer to him than before. The judge reviewed the documents in front of her. "Due to the respondent's behavior and the preliminary findings, I'm issuing an immediate suspension on further HOA enforcement actions until review is complete." The reaction was immediate. Shocked gasps, murmurs. A few quiet, relieved sighs from neighbors who had been victims of Marlene's tyranny but never dared to speak. Marlene's face contorted. "You can't suspend an HOA president. I'm elected." Judge Stanford leaned forward. "You assaulted someone in my courtroom. You jeopardized judicial decorum. You manipulated evidence. And now you're acting as if the law doesn't apply to you." Her voice sharpened. "You are suspended pending investigation, effective immediately." Leah pressed her hand to her mouth. Elias remained still. The victory strategy was unfolding exactly as it should. Public exposure, not forced, not dramatic. Simply the truth illuminated in front of everyone. Judge Stanford continued, "Mr. Grant, remain available. I may need your assistance as this case progresses." "Yes, Your Honor," he replied calmly. The judge signaled for the bailiff. "Escort Ms. Stokes to the side conference room until charges are processed." Marlene rose, unsteadily. Her earlier arrogance had evaporated, leaving only disbelief in its wake. As she passed Elias, she glared, but the glare didn't land the way it once would have. Power had slipped through her fingers. The gallery watched her go, silent, judging, done with her. Leah stood at the podium, tears, not from pain, but from release, brimming at the edges of her eyes. Elias stepped to her side, offering the smallest nod. They weren't done, the case wasn't over. But the shift had begun. The room no longer belonged to Marlene. It didn't even belong to the judge. For the first time, the room belonged to the truth. The moment the bailiff guided Marlene out of the courtroom, the energy shifted again. Not as sharp as before, but steadier. Like a room finally exhaling after holding its breath too long. Leah stood near the podium, fingers interlaced, trying to comprehend the sudden turn of events. Her cheek still burned faintly, but something else pulsed stronger beneath the surface. Relief. Not full justice yet. But a doorway cracked open. Judge Stanford gathered the scattered papers on the bench and looked toward Elias. "Mr. Grant, I need a complete written summary of your preliminary assessment by tomorrow morning." "Yes, Your Honor," he replied, tone level, not revealing the small flicker of surprise. He hadn't expected to be pulled back into procedures he'd left behind years ago. But the protocols lived in him, unchanged. Leah brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Can we go home now?" Her voice was soft, steady, brave. Not because she wasn't shaken, but because she refused to let fear define the moment. Elias nodded. "We're done here for today." But they weren't fully done. Not with Marlene, not with the HOA, not with the months of silent intimidation that had been building toward this explosion. The judge's suspension order was only the first blow. More would come, and they would follow the exact path of the victory strategy, exposing Marlene fully and publicly. As they walked out of the courtroom, people parted instinctively, not out of fear but respect. Some murmured soft words of sympathy to Leah. Others glanced curiously at Elias, the maintenance man they thought they knew but clearly didn't. The clerk caught up to them halfway down the hall. "Mr. Grant, wait." He turned. She seemed hesitant, holding her tablet close against her chest. "There's something you should know. I didn't say it in front of the judge because I wasn't completely sure yet." She took a breath. A few months ago, Judge Reed approved a cluster of HOA citation appeals, all in favor of Ms. Stokes. Leah's eyebrows lifted. "All of them?" The clerk nodded. "And some involved homeowners who never even showed up to testify. It raised questions, but nothing concrete enough to escalate." Elias understood what she was really saying. There was a pattern, and today's events cracked it open. "Thank you," he said. "Send me anything you have." She nodded and hurried back toward her station. Leah walked beside him quietly, processing. Do you think Judge Reed was helping her on purpose?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He wasn't someone who jumped to conclusions. "We only follow evidence," he finally said. "But yes, something was off." They exited through the heavy courthouse doors into the bright afternoon light. A few neighbors from the gallery followed them outside, gathering in small clusters. People who had once ignored them now seemed eager to stand near them. One woman approached shyly, a mother from 2 houses down. "I'm so sorry for what she did to you," she told Leah. "She's been terrorizing half the neighborhood. We didn't know how to fight back." Leah offered a small, grateful smile. "You shouldn't have had to." Elias watched the exchange, noting the shift. Fear was turning into unity, silence into solidarity. Marlene's downfall wasn't going to stay contained to a single courtroom moment. It was spreading already. He turned to Leah. "Let's get home. Jasper's waiting." Their son had stayed with a neighbor that morning, unaware of the chaos unfolding. The walk to the parking lot felt strangely quiet, as if the world needed a moment to catch up to the truth that had just cracked open. As they reached their car, Leah paused. "You were incredible in there. I didn't even know you could do all that." Elias rested a hand on her arm. "I trained for situations like this. I never expected to use it again." He hesitated. "But today, it mattered." She nodded. "It mattered more than you know." They drove home, the hum of the road filling the silence between them. In the rearview mirror, Elias caught glimpses of Leah studying him. Not with fear, but with renewed understanding. Her husband, the quiet man who fixed leaky sinks and replaced broken porch lights, had once been someone who held entire investigations steady in the middle of chaos. Back in their neighborhood, a few curtains twitched as they parked. News traveled fast. Faster still now that Marlene's power had been publicly dented. When they stepped inside, Jasper ran toward them, arms outstretched. Leah scooped him up, holding him close. Elias ruffled the boy's hair and felt something settle inside him. A silent promise that today was only the beginning of protecting their family's dignity. He walked into the kitchen to pour Leah a glass of water, but as he reached for a cup, something on the counter caught his eye. A small, folded notice slipped under the door during their absence. Another HOA violation. Of course, he unfolded it slowly. Failure to maintain approved yard aesthetics. Immediate corrective action required. Review scheduled within 48 hours. And signed at the bottom, in bold strokes, even though she'd been escorted out moments ago. Marlene Stokes. Leah's breath hitched when she saw it. She filed this today? Elias studied the timestamp. 2 hours ago. Leah's knees weakened. She knew what she was planning in court. The violation wasn't about the yard. It was a message, a warning, a declaration that she wasn't done. Elias folded the paper methodically. "Good," he murmured. "It's another piece of evidence." Leah blinked, surprised. "You're not angry?" He looked at her, calm as stone. "No. She just handed us exactly what we need." This was behavioral foreshadowing, the kind that reinforced the truth. He wasn't done, he wasn't rattled, and he wasn't afraid. The public exposure phase had begun, and now Marlene had given him more fuel. This wasn't over. It was just entering the part where truth becomes undeniable. Elias set the new violation notice on the kitchen table, smoothing it with the flat of his hand, while Leah stood a few feet away, arms wrapped around herself. The house felt smaller than usual, like the walls were absorbing the tension and holding it tight. Outside, a lawnmower buzzed faintly somewhere down the block, but inside their home, everything stood still. Jasper tugged at Leah's shirt. "Mom, why are you sad?" She forced a smile. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Go play for a bit." He darted off, unaware of the battle unfolding around him. Elias examined the violation again, this time reading each line with the precision of a man trained to analyze intent as much as content. The timestamp, the phrasing, the urgency. It wasn't just about power, it was about preparation. Marlene hadn't snapped in the courtroom impulsively. She'd walked in ready for confrontation, confident the judge would shield her. But now Judge Reed lay in a hospital bed, and Marlene's arrogance had turned into evidence. Leah pulled out a chair and sat, fingers threading together. "She's not going to stop, is she?" "No," he said softly. "People like her don't stop unless someone makes them." Leah swallowed. "And that someone is you." He didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. The quiet resolve in his eyes said everything. He unfolded the violation again. "Her signature placement is aggressive. She wanted us to see it immediately." Leah leaned forward. But why file another violation when she knew she was heading into court today? "Because she expected to win," he said. "She expected the judge to take her side, and she wanted this waiting for us when we got home. One more way to show she still had control." Leah's shoulders drooped, but Elias wasn't finished. He took out his phone and snapped a photo of the document, then another from a different angle. "We're keeping everything, every notice, every timestamp, every pattern." "What happens next?" she asked. "Now," he said calmly, "we document." He walked to the window and peered out toward the street. A few neighbors were outside, watering lawns, taking out trash, pretending not to watch their house. But their eyes lingered, curious about the events they'd witnessed earlier. He stepped onto the porch with the violation in hand. Leah followed, hesitant but trusting. The breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and distant barbecue smoke. normal things in a neighborhood living under abnormal pressure. Across the street, Mr. Hammond, an older man who'd lived there for decades, stood beside his mailbox. He raised a hand in greeting. "Heard what happened at the courthouse," he said, voice low. "Couldn't believe it." Leah nodded. "It was a lot." Hammond's gaze shifted to Elias. "I should have spoken up months ago. She pulled the same stunts on me last year. I didn't have proof, but I knew something wasn't right." Elias stepped closer. "Would you be willing to tell the oversight board what happened?" Hammond hesitated, glancing toward Marlene's large 2-story house. She made life hell for anyone who questioned her. "I know," Elias said, "but she's not in charge right now. The court halted her authority, and the more people speak up, the less power she'll have left." Hammond considered, then nodded. "I'll talk." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was the first sign of community support, something that mattered deeply in the public exposure phase. People were finding their courage because someone else had stepped forward first. As Hammond left, Leah turned to Elias. "Do you really think others will talk too?" "They will," he said. "Fear weakens when truth gets daylight." They walked back inside, closing the door gently behind them. Elias laid the violation notice beside the others. 6 months of harassment neatly lined up, each one a breadcrumb leading straight back to Marlene's abuse of authority. He grabbed his old worn notebook from a cabinet. Leah blinked. "You still have that?" "It's habit," he said. "I never throw away tools that work." He flipped it open, the pages filled with small, sharp handwriting, notes from investigations long past. He turned to a clean page and began writing. Dates, patterns, inconsistencies, witness leads. Leah watched as he organized the puzzle with the quiet precision of someone built for this kind of work. "You're different when you do this," she whispered. "Not in a scary way, just different." He paused, pen hovering. "I don't want you to feel like you're living with a stranger." "You're not a stranger," she said quickly. "You're just more than I realized." He closed the notebook softly. "I'm still me. I just haven't used this part of myself in a while." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything between them both heavy and strengthening at once. Then Elias stood and headed toward the door. "Where are you going?" Leah asked. "To take pictures," he replied. "Of the yard, of the house, of anything she might use next. If Marlene wants to keep playing this game, every move she makes will help prove her pattern." Leah followed him outside again. Together, they walked the yard, documenting every inch. The grass length, the flower beds, the mailbox. Nothing out of place. Nothing to justify her violation. Neighbors peeked from porches. One even gave a thumbs up. The public was waking up. When they finished, Leah slipped her hand into his. "Do you think she's angry right now?" Elias gave a faint wry breath. "She's furious. Losing power makes people like her dangerous." "And you're not worried?" "No." He checked the violation again. "Because she keeps proving exactly who she is, and the more she acts like this, the easier it becomes to expose her fully." They went back inside as the sun dipped lower, painting the living room in warm gold. Leah set dinner on the counter, but neither of them was truly thinking about food. They were thinking about the fight ahead. And Elias, calm, steady, unshakable, knew one thing. This wasn't just a battle about HOA violations anymore. This was a battle about truth. And truth, once awakened, doesn't go back to sleep. Evening settled over the neighborhood with the kind of quiet that felt both peaceful and tense, like a lull before the next wave. Inside the house, Leah tidied the kitchen while Jasper played on the floor with his toy cars. Elias sat at the table, the glow of a small lamp casting warm light across his notebook as he pieced together the events of the day. Every detail mattered now. Every line Marlene crossed helped shape the truth he needed to reveal. Leah finally slid into the chair opposite him. "You've been writing for an hour. Do you want tea?" He nodded. "Thanks." She rose to make it, but her eyes lingered on his face. She was trying to read him, trying to understand how he could stay so calm after everything. But calm didn't mean unshaken. It meant focused, purposeful. It meant he saw the path that lay ahead and knew exactly where it needed to go. When she set the cup beside him, she sat again but didn't speak right away. She stared at the notebook. "Can I ask you something?" He set his pen down. "Of course. Why did you stop doing this? Before? When you left the investigations?" He looked at the pages for a moment, then at her. "Because our daughter needed me, and I wasn't going to choose a job over her." Leah's eyes softened with old, familiar grief. They didn't talk about their daughter often, not because they avoided her memory, but because the loss lived inside them quietly. Still, the reminder of why Elias walked away from his former life gave new weight to the way he'd stepped back into it today. "I didn't realize how much you gave that up," Leah said. "I didn't see it as giving up," he replied. "I saw it as choosing what mattered." She took his hand. "And now, you're choosing us again." He squeezed her fingers gently. "Always." Their quiet moment was broken by a sharp, unexpected knock at the door. Leah stiffened. Elias rose immediately, instincts firing despite the years since he'd last trusted them. He approached the door with careful steps, angling himself slightly in case the knock wasn't friendly. But when he pulled it open, he found Mrs. Delgado from the corner house standing outside, wringing her hands. She leaned in close. "I'm sorry to bother you so late. I couldn't sleep without telling you something." Elias opened the screen door. "Come inside." She stepped in, glancing nervously toward the windows as if worried about being seen. Leah joined them, guiding Mrs. Delgado to a chair. "What happened?" Leah asked gently. Mrs. Delgado took a shaky breath. "Marlene came by earlier. She was furious. She said you humiliated her in front of the whole courtroom. She kept ranting about how she'd fix this neighborhood and take care of her enemies." Her voice wavered, and she said something about knowing who helped her get Judge Reed on her side. Elias felt the shift immediately. A new thread, a new connection. "Did she say a name?" he asked. Mrs. Delgado shook her head. "Just that she wasn't done. She said she'd clean up this place properly, and the way she said it scared me." Leah inhaled sharply. "She threatened you?" "She threatened everyone," Mrs. Delgado whispered. Elias nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling us. It helps more than you know." She stood, looking relieved. "If you need a statement, I'll give one. She's bullied this street long enough." After she left, Leah turned to Elias. "This is getting dangerous." He met her worried gaze. "Yes, which means she's losing control." "And that's good?" she asked quietly. "For the strategy," he answered. "Not for her judgment." He picked up his notebook again and added a line beneath the day's events. Threats toward neighbors. Implied collusion with Judge Reed. Witness, Delgado. This was the power of public exposure. Not just revealing truth, but emboldening others to step into it with him. He closed the notebook. "We need to be ready for whatever she does next." Leah exhaled. "I hate that she still has this kind of influence even after being suspended." "She doesn't have the judge anymore," he said, "and she doesn't have the courtroom. What she has is desperation. That's when people like her make mistakes." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of Jasper wandering into the room, rubbing his eyes. "Mom? Dad? Can I sleep with you tonight?" Leah nodded softly. "Of course, sweetheart." She led him down the hallway, and Elias followed, switching off lights as he passed. They tucked Jasper in between them, the boy curling close to Leah's side. Elias rested a hand on their son's back, for a moment, letting the warm rise and fall of his breathing ground him. This was why he fought. Not for pride, not for revenge, but for safety, dignity, family. After Jasper drifted to sleep, Elias slipped out of bed quietly and returned to the living room. He sat in the dark for a while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint night breeze tapping at the windows. Then he turned to the small safe beneath the cabinet. He hadn't opened it in years, not since he decided to leave that part of his life behind. He spun the combination, hesitating only once before pulling it open. Inside lay a few old badges, documents, and the thin, leather-bound journal he once used for field cases. He lifted the journal with slow, steady hands. It wasn't nostalgia, it was preparation, because tomorrow everything shifted from reaction to pursuit, and the next phase of the strategy, exposing Marlene with undeniable proof, was finally about to begin. The leather-bound journal felt heavier than its size should allow, as if the weight of everything he once was lived inside those worn pages. Elias placed it gently on the coffee table, flipping it open to the section on procedural misconduct, red flags, patterns, behavioral markers, all the things he thought he'd never need again. Tonight, he needed every line. The house was dark except for the soft glow from the hallway nightlight. Leah and Jasper had fallen asleep, but Elias's mind was sharp, alert. Something about Mrs. Delgado's warning gnawed at him. He tapped his pen against the table and started mapping out a timeline. The earlier violations, the cluster of manipulated citations, Judge Reed's unusual rulings, the sudden attack in the courtroom. Every piece pointed toward one conclusion. This wasn't just personal harassment. This was systemic abuse wrapped in HOA contracts and judicial favoritism. And Marlene never operated alone. Elias leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, trying to recall the small inconsistencies he'd ignored before. The identical signatures across dozens of households, the HOA meetings where no one else spoke, the whispered threats about connections. Something was there, buried beneath months of intimidation. He was still deep in thought when the front door creaked. His head snapped up. Leah stood in the doorway, robe wrapped tightly around her. "You're still awake?" He nodded. "Couldn't sleep?" She stepped into the room, eyes drifting to the open safe. "You opened that." "I needed to." She sat beside him, worry flickering through her expression. "Is it that serious?" He didn't soften the truth. "Yes." She exhaled slowly, reaching out to touch his hand. "Then we face it together." He nodded once, grateful for her steadiness. They had weathered worse storms in silence. This time, they had purpose. Before he could speak again, a thud sounded outside. Quiet, but unmistakably close. Leah went still. "What was that?" Elias rose silently, crossing the living room in measured steps. He peeked through the blinds. A shadow moved near their mailbox, quick, sharp, intentional. Then another thud, something landing. A package? A note? He motioned Leah back. "Stay inside." He stepped outside barefoot, the cool night air brushing his skin. The porch light flickered to life, revealing the object lying near the mailbox. A manila envelope. Unmarked. Elias crouched, scanning the street. No cars, no footsteps. Just the quiet hum of street lamps. He grabbed the envelope and retreated inside. Leah met him at the door. "What is it?" "I don't know." He opened it carefully. Inside was a thick stack of printed emails, meeting minutes, and scanned documents, HOA correspondence, but not normal correspondence. These were threads of conversations between Marlene and Judge Reed's niece. Conversations implying favors, pressures, payments disguised as community support contributions. Leah gasped softly. "My God!" "This is evidence," Elias said quietly. "Strong evidence. But who left it here?" He sifted deeper into the pile. At the bottom sat a single handwritten note. "You're not the only one she's hurt. Do something with this." No signature, no clue. Leah shivered. "Someone's scared of her. Or tired of protecting her," he said. He brought the papers to the table, spreading them out carefully. The pattern emerged quickly. Improper approvals, illegal fast-tracking of property decisions, thousands of dollars unaccounted for. It was far worse than he expected. Leah sat beside him, eyes scanning the documents. She used her position for personal gain, and the judge's niece helped her? Leah's voice trembled. "Elias, this isn't just harassment, it's corruption." He nodded slowly. "And now we have proof." This was the turning point. The shift from defense into strategic offense. The victory strategy demanded public exposure, and this stack of documents was the spark. Just then, Leah touched his arm. "What if she finds out someone betrayed her?" "She will," he said. "People like her always look for someone to blame. And she'll assume it's us. It doesn't matter what she assumes." He tapped the papers. "What matters is that this ends." He began organizing the documents into categories: financial irregularities, legal inconsistencies, record manipulation. Leah helped, handing him pages, smoothing others. Despite the fear, they worked with a strange synchronicity born from years of facing hardships side by side. After an hour, the evidence formed a full pattern, a structure showing deliberate misconduct. Leah stared at it all. She could go to jail for this. "She should," he said gently. "But that's not my decision. My job is to make sure the truth reaches the people who can act on it." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," Elias said. "I'm filing a report with the Oversight Board." Leah's brows lifted. "You're stepping back into it fully." He met her eyes. "Only for as long as it takes to protect us." Just then, Jasper's voice drifted faintly from down the hall. "Dad?" Elias stood and walked to him. The boy blinked sleepily. "I had a bad dream." Elias lifted him gently. "You're safe." Jasper nestled against his shoulder as Elias carried him back to bed. Leah followed, smoothing the blankets. When Jasper was settled, she whispered, "You're doing the right thing." Elias looked at their son's peaceful face. "The only thing." Back in the living room, he returned to the table. He added the final piece of the night, logging the envelope's arrival, time, and condition. Every detail mattered. Every detail built toward the exposure that would dismantle Marlene's power. Then he closed the journal. Tomorrow, the fight would leave their house. Tomorrow, the truth would reach the system she manipulated for years. And tomorrow, Elias would no longer just defend his family. He would expose everything. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds in thin, pale stripes, laying across the kitchen table where the documents still sat, neatly arranged, unmistakable, damning. Elias stood over them, coffee cooling untouched in a mug beside him. He wasn't staring at the pages anymore. He was seeing the path they formed, the one he needed to walk. Leah stepped into the room, tightening her robe. "You didn't sleep, did you?" He shook his head lightly. "Didn't need to." She moved beside him, following his gaze over the evidence. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once you file the report, there's no taking it back." "That's the point," he said softly. "It's time." He gathered the documents into a folder, sliding the anonymous note on top. Leah's hand brushed his arm. "No matter what happens today, we're together." He nodded. "We always are." They woke Jasper, prepared a quick breakfast, and walked him to the neighbor's house. Mrs. Patel smiled warmly, sensing something bigger beneath the surface but not asking. "We'll take good care of him." "Thank you," Leah said. Back at the car, Elias placed the folder gently on the passenger seat. The drive to the courthouse was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt like the world holding its breath before something irreversible. Leah reached over and intertwined her fingers with his, anchoring him as they pulled into the familiar lot. Inside, the courthouse buzzed with low voices and clicking heels. People gave them curious glances, some respectful, some uncertain, all aware of the storm that had unfolded the day before. Elias walked with calm purpose toward the Judicial Oversight Division's office on the second floor. Leah stayed close behind him. A receptionist looked up as they approached. "Can I help you?" "Yes, I need to file an emergency misconduct report." Her expression sharpened. "Name?" "Elias Grant." Recognition flickered. "From yesterday's incident?" "Yes." She stood. "One moment, I'll get Investigator Rhodes." Moments later, a tall woman with neatly tied hair and sharp eyes emerged from an office. Her gaze landed on Elias, and she extended her hand. "Mr. Grant, I read the interim report from yesterday. Impressive work under pressure." "Thank you," he replied. "What brings you in today?" Elias opened the folder on her desk. "Evidence. HOA corruption tied to judicial favoritism. Possibly financial misconduct involving Judge Reed's niece." Rhodes raised a brow. "That's serious." "Yes," he said, "and it's not speculation." He began laying out the pages: emails, altered violation records, suspicious approvals, timestamps, handwritten notes. Leah watched silently, her heart pounding as the pattern became undeniable to an outsider. Rhodes examined each document with a practiced eye. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "It was left at my doorstep last night," Elias said. "No signature." Rhodes tapped the anonymous note with her pen. "A whistleblower." "Yes." "And you believe these are authentic?" "I believe whoever left them wanted to stop her, and I can verify the inconsistencies myself." Rhodes stepped back, hands on her hips. "This is more than we expected from a simple HOA dispute." Elias met her gaze evenly. This was never simple. She walked to a file cabinet, retrieved a sealed packet, and returned. "I'm opening a formal investigation. I need you to sign as the reporting party and attach your interim findings." He signed without hesitation. Rhodes continued. "Given your background, I'd like your cooperation as a consultant. Temporarily, not as staff, as an expert." Leah's eyes widened slightly, but Elias responded calmly. "If it helps the case, yes." "It does." Rhodes closed the folder. "We'll move on this quickly. Ms. Stokes will be contacted for questioning by tomorrow." Leah exhaled, relief flickering briefly across her face. But as they turned to leave, Rhodes added, "Mr. Grant, be cautious. When people like her realize the walls are closing in, they tend to lash out." Elias nodded. "I know." They walked back down the hall, the courthouse buzzing louder now. Leah slipped her arm through his. It's really happening, isn't it? It started the moment she sat in that chair, he said quietly. Outside, the air felt cooler, sharper. They approached their car, but before Elias could unlock it, a voice called from behind them. "Grant!" He turned to see Officer Dempsey jogging toward them, one of the beat officers who often patrolled their neighborhood. His face was tense. "You didn't hear this from me," Dempsey said, lowering his voice. "We just got a call. Marlene's house? Windows broken, door cracked, looks like someone tore through her front yard. Could be vandalism, could be retaliation, but she's blaming you." Leah's breath caught. "Us? Why?" "Because you embarrassed her," Dempsey said. "But that's not all. She told dispatch she expects you to make your next move soon. Whatever that means." Elias frowned. "Did she file a report?" "She tried," Dempsey said, "but without evidence there's nothing to act on, just a lot of shouting." Leah exchanged a worried glance with Elias. "She's spiraling," Dempsey nodded. "I'd keep an eye out. She's not thinking straight." After the officer left, Leah leaned against the car, trying to steady herself. She's losing everything, and it's happening fast. "That's why she's dangerous right now," Elias said calmly. "But this is how people collapse when the truth catches up." He opened the car door for her. "Come on, let's go home. We need to prepare for whatever she tries next." As they drove away, Leah watched the courthouse shrink in the rearview mirror, its tall structure standing like a silent witness to the unraveling of a woman who once believed the law bent for her alone. Elias held the steering wheel with steady hands. The exposure was spreading. The system was waking up. And the woman who slapped Leah in front of a courtroom was about to face the consequences of every abuse she'd ever hidden. The ride home was silent in a way that didn't feel empty, more like the quiet before a storm finally breaks. Leah sat with her hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the passing houses, each one carrying its own whispered version of what had happened at the courthouse. Elias kept his focus on the road, but the tension in the set of his jaw said he was already calculating the next steps. The oversight report was filed. The investigation had begun. And now Marlene, stripped of her safety net, was unpredictable. When they pulled into their driveway, something felt wrong immediately. The air was too still, the street too quiet, and on their front step sat another envelope. Leah froze. "Elias? I see it." He stepped out first, scanning the street with trained eyes. No movement, no watchers. But the placement of the envelope, perfectly centered, angled deliberately, felt different from the anonymous evidence packet last night. This wasn't someone trying to help. This was a message. He picked it up slowly, and the moment he touched it, Leah's breath hitched. It felt lighter than paper should. When he slid a finger under the flap and carefully opened it, a single printed photo slid into his hand. Their house, or more specifically, their backyard. A shot taken through the fence slats angled directly at Jasper's swing set. Leah's hand flew to her mouth. "No." Elias felt something cold settle in his chest. He turned the photo over. On the back, in thick black marker, were 3 words. "Control your wife." Leah let out a small sound, half fear, half disbelief. She wouldn't go near Jasper. "She won't," Elias said calmly, though his heartbeat tightened. "But she wants us to think she will." He brought the photo inside, placing it on the table with the other evidence. Leah paced behind him, anxiety crackling through her like static. "This is too far. She's threatening our child, Elias." He looked at her, his voice steady. "Which means she's desperate. She's dangerous." "She's unraveling," he corrected softly, not to dismiss her fear, but to frame the truth. And when people like her start losing their power, they push harder. They get bold. They get sloppy. Leah wrapped her arms around herself. How do we protect Jasper? We take precautions, and we don't hide. He picked up the photo again. This goes straight to Rhodes. Before Leah could respond, a knock sounded sharply at the door. Both of them stiffened. Leah whispered, "Is it her?" "No." Elias's instincts kicked in. She wouldn't knock. He approached the door slowly and opened it just enough to see who stood outside. Mrs. Patel. Relief washed through Leah's face as the neighbor stepped inside quickly, her expression tight with worry. "I came as soon as I could. Something's happening at Marlene's house." Elias leaned forward slightly. "What kind of something?" "She's outside screaming," Mrs. Patel said breathlessly. "At who? I don't know. But she's ranting about betrayal and war and how the neighborhood is full of snakes. She's thrown things on her lawn, and the police came, but she told them you were trying to destroy her. She keeps shouting your name." Leah's hand gripped the back of a chair. "She's spiraling, Elias." Mrs. Patel nodded. "I've lived here 20 years. I've never seen her lose control like this." "Thank you for telling us," Elias said gently. "Stay inside tonight. Keep your doors locked." Mrs. Patel nodded, fear etched in her face. "Be careful." After she left, Elias locked the door behind her and turned to Leah. "We need to be proactive." Leah swallowed. "What do we do?" "We get everything ready for when Rhodes arrives." He gathered the documents again, including the new photo, and we prepare for the next level of exposure. Leah blinked. "There's another level?" "Yes." He sat at the table, opening his old journal again. "Once oversight begins their investigation, they'll need witness testimony, a timeline, and proof that her behavior escalated beyond simple HOA harassment." He wrote swiftly, his pen moving with practiced certainty. "This," he said, holding up the photo, "is evidence of intimidation. And the envelope last night? That's evidence of internal collapse within her circle." Leah sat beside him, voice low. "So what now?" "Now," Elias said, "we show Rhodes everything, and we document today the same way we documented yesterday." He stepped outside with his phone, taking pictures of the envelope on the step, the angle of its placement, the timestamp on his screen. Leah watched through the window, her fear blending with trust, because she knew he wasn't reacting emotionally. He was building a case that couldn't be knocked down. When he came back inside, he picked up the phone and called Rhodes directly. She answered on the second ring. "Grant? I have new evidence," he said. "A threat." Rhodes's voice sharpened. "Verbal? Photographic?" "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Do not leave your house." "We won't." He hung up and turned to Leah. "It's moving faster now." She sank into a chair. "This feels like a war." He sat beside her, placing his hand over hers. "It's not war." She looked at him with tired, frightened eyes. "Then what is it?" "It's exposure," he said quietly. "And exposure always gets darker before the truth hits daylight." 30 minutes later, the street filled with headlights. Not just Rhodes, 3 official vehicles, 2 officers, 1 unmarked car. Leah inhaled sharply. "She's really doing this." "No," Elias corrected softly, rising to meet them at the door. "We are." As Rhodes approached with a hardened expression, Elias handed her the photo, and with that, the final stage of the victory strategy began. Public exposure turning toward poetic justice, inch by inch. Rhodes didn't waste time. The moment Elias handed her the photo, her expression tightened into something sharper than simple concern. This was the look of an investigator realizing the situation had crossed into criminal territory. She signaled the officers behind her, and they stepped forward in a protective formation that made Leah instinctively move closer to Elias. "When was this dropped off?" Rhodes asked, eyes scanning every detail. "Less than an hour ago," Elias said. "I took pictures before moving it." "Good," she replied. "Chain of custody starts now." Leah pointed toward the back of the house. "It was taken through our fence. That means someone was in our yard." Rhodes's jaw flexed. "Then this isn't only intimidation, it's trespassing with malicious intent." One of the officers knelt near the porch, shining a light across the ground. "Ma'am, fresh footprints leading around the house." Leah's breath caught. "She was here?" "Maybe her," Rhodes said. "Maybe someone she sent. Either way, this is escalation." She turned to Elias. "And escalation means she's about to make a mistake we can use." That was exactly the leverage he needed. Elias stepped aside as Rhodes and the officers walked the perimeter, documenting everything. Leah hovered near the hallway, watching every movement with a quiet fear she tried to hide. After the officers returned, Rhodes motioned for them to sit. "We're opening a criminal case," she said. "Not just oversight, criminal." Leah clasped her hands together. "What does that mean for us?" "It means things are going to move fast now, faster than she can anticipate." Rhodes turned to Elias. "But you need to understand something. With people like Ms. Stokes, when cornered, they don't retreat. They retaliate." Leah shivered. "She already has." "Not fully," Rhodes said. "If she had, your house would have been vandalized already. This photo, that's a warning shot. She's telling you she still thinks she has leverage." Elias leaned forward. "Then we take the leverage away." Rhodes nodded. "Exactly." Outside, voices rose in the street. Curious neighbors had gathered, whispering anxiously as the police presence magnified the already tense atmosphere. Elias peeked through the blinds. Patrol cars filled the curb. People stared at their house, some with fear, some with silent support. Leah joined him. "They're scared." "No," Elias said quietly. "They're watching the truth unfold." Just then, another officer approached Rhodes from the porch. "Ma'am, dispatch picked up a call earlier from Ms. Stokes. She's at her house still yelling. She's demanding to speak to whoever's investigating the betrayal." Rhodes sighed. "That matches what her neighbors have reported." She faced Elias. "I'm heading there next. I need to know if you'll be available to consult in person." "Yes," he said without hesitation. Leah tensed. "Elias," he turned to her gently, "this ends with exposure. I can't step back now." Her throat bobbed. "I just don't want you in danger." "I won't be," he said calmly. "Not with police presence, and not with her unraveling this fast." Rhodes gathered the folder of evidence. "I'll call you when we're on site." As she and the officers departed, their vehicles peeled away down the street, heading straight toward Marlene's house. Neighbors stepped back, murmuring among themselves. The whole block felt like a powder keg waiting for the final spark. Inside, Leah pressed her hand against her stomach, breathing deeply. "What if she comes here again?" "She won't," Elias said. "Not tonight?" "How do you know?" "Because she's too focused on Rhodes now. She thinks this is between her and the system. She hasn't realized yet that she triggered this mess herself." Leah let out a shaky laugh. "She'll blame you for everything." "Of course she will," he said. "People like her always blame others for the consequences of their own actions." He walked to the window again, scanning the darkness. Leah watched him. The way he held himself, the quiet steadiness, the strength he carried not with force but with certainty. The same man who fixed broken vents and replaced light bulbs was now guiding a legal storm like he'd never stepped away from that world. She moved closer, touching his arm. I never asked, but does this bring back anything from before? His eyes flicked to hers. Parts of it, yes. Does it bother you? He shook his head. Not anymore. Back then, investigations were about strangers, but this is different. This is my family, my home. He exhaled slowly. There's clarity in that. Leah's eyes softened. You're not the man she thinks you are. No, he said, meeting her gaze. I'm not. A sharp vibration buzzed on the counter. Elias picked up his phone. A message from Rhodes. Arrived at Stokes' residence. Situation escalating. Calling now. His phone rang immediately. He answered. Grant. Rhodes's voice was tight. She's in the front yard screaming your name. Claims you're running a conspiracy. She's throwing documents, ripping up mail, shouting about lost power. Leah's face piled. Rhodes continued. We're detaining her tonight for safety and obstruction. But tomorrow, it's going public. Public? Elias asked. Yes, Rhodes said. With your permission, your interim report will be part of the initial release. Your testimony included. Leah breathed in sharply. Everyone will know. Elias didn't hesitate. Do it. Rhodes exhaled. Good. We'll process her tonight. Stay inside. Officers will patrol your street. When the call ended, Leah sank onto the couch, covering her mouth with both hands. This is real. This is really happening. Elias sat beside her, gently lowering her hands so she could breathe. It was always going to come to this. And tomorrow? She whispered. He looked toward the dark window. Tomorrow, he said, she faces everything she's ever done. Publicly. He placed the photo of their backyard on the table again, not as a threat, but as a reminder of why they fought. Because truth wasn't just coming. It was about to be undeniable. The night passed in tense fragments, short pockets of half-sleep broken by headlights sweeping across the walls as patrol cars circled the neighborhood. Leah barely rested at all, her body curled protectively around Jasper, who slept between them without sensing the war unfolding outside his window. Elias stayed awake through most of it, sitting in the dim hallway where he could see the front door, the back window, and both bedroom entrances. Old instincts he thought he'd buried hummed under his skin. By sunrise, the house felt like a held breath. Leah stepped into the hallway, her tired eyes finding him. Did you sleep at all? A little. She sat beside him, leaning against his shoulder. Is today the day it ends? It's the day it breaks open, he murmured. Ending comes after exposure. And exposure was coming fast. A knock sounded at the door, firm, official. Leah tensed, but Elias's hand assured her before he rose to answer. When he opened the door, Rhodes stood on the porch with a file in hand and the restrained intensity of someone carrying news big enough to reshape the day. Grant, we need to talk. He stepped aside to let her in. Leah greeted her with a polite, strained nod. Rhodes wasted no time. We processed Ms. Stokes last night. She was belligerent, incoherent, convinced the neighborhood was conspiring against her. She opened the file and slid a page forward. But this morning, the state attorney approved the preliminary charges. Leah covered her mouth. Already? She gave us everything we needed, Rhodes said. Assault, intimidation, evidence tampering, abuse of authority, and probable cause for financial misconduct. She looked at Elias. Your documentation, the notes, timestamps, procedural analysis, it gave us a clean chain. The judge collapse, her meltdown, the threats, all of it tightened the case. Leah exhaled shakily. So what happens now? Now, Rhodes said, we make it public. She pulled out a digital recorder and set it on the table. Per protocol, your interim testimony must be recorded. It will be used to validate the initial investigation before the oversight board. Elias sat, calm, controlled, ready. Rhodes pressed record. State your full name. Elias Grant. And your role in this case? Interim investigator per emergency courthouse protocol. Witness to the assault on my wife. Reporting party for intimidation and evidence misconduct. The questions flowed, crisp and clinical. Elias described the courtroom events, the HOA patterns, the violations, the escalation, the anonymous documents, the envelope on the doorstep. Leah listened, tears gathering quietly, not from fear, but from the surreal weight of hearing her husband speak like a man reclaiming a part of himself. When the recording ended, Rhodes gathered her materials. This afternoon, the Oversight Board will release a public notice. The HOA's operations will be frozen pending audit, and Ms. Stokes will appear before a judge for arraignment. Leah pulled in a breath. It's really happening. It is, Rhodes said. And you should prepare. When cases like this go public, the community usually reacts quickly. People you've never met may come forward. Elias nodded. Good, they should. Rhodes softened slightly. Most people don't stand up the way you did, and most don't follow through, but your family won't be alone in this. When she left, Leah finally let herself collapse into the nearest chair. I can't believe it. After everything she's done, she's accountable now, Elias said gently, for the first time. By mid-afternoon, the entire neighborhood seemed to buzz with unseen electricity. Phones vibrated, doors opened, groups formed on sidewalks. The local news van rolled in, its large antenna rising slowly as if announcing that the world was finally paying attention. Leah peeked through the window. Is that? Yes, Elias said. They're covering it. Within minutes, 3 neighbors knocked on their door, each with stories. Undocumented citations, threats, fines that appeared without reason. One elderly man trembled as he admitted he'd paid hundreds because Marlene scared him into thinking his property would be seized. Leah offered him a seat. Elias wrote everything down. By early evening, the block had changed. People weren't whispering anymore. They were talking, pointing, sharing, uniting. When the public notice officially posted online, phones dinged across the neighborhood. HOA operations frozen. President under investigation. Community members urged to submit complaints. Leah stared at the announcement, tears slipping down her cheeks. She can't hurt anyone now. Not anymore, Elias said, his voice calm but carrying something deeper. Vindication, yes, but something gentler too. Protection, relief, closure. As the sun dipped low, Jasper climbed into his lap, still blissfully unaware of the storm that had finally passed. Mom says we're all safe now, he said. Elias wrapped an arm around him. We are. And Leah came close, resting her head against his shoulder, finally letting her body unwind after months of tension she'd carried alone. Neighbors drifted home, the street slowly returning to the quiet it should have always had. Not fear, not surveillance, just the quiet of a neighborhood free from the shadow of one woman's power. Elias looked at the folder one last time and closed it. Truth had done its job. Justice had followed. And tomorrow, they could finally breathe like a family again. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Something powerful is coming your way. Stay with me, because each story uncovers a truth most people never talk about. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?